Hey there guys, we're taking a look at Call of Duty Modern Warfare Remastered running on the AMD Ryzen 5 5500U. Now earlier we had taken a look at the first original version of this game, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. This time around we're taking a look at the remaster of this game. Now the game is currently running at the lowest in-game graphics settings, except the textures were set to high. And of course we have these shadows disabled to try to get the most performance possible out of this. Now overall the performance that we're getting here, at least in the opening mission, is actually pretty decent, but nothing remarkable. At least at the stock 15 watt TDP, we're pretty much running into issues with 1% lows dropping below 60, though not by a significant margin, and we are overall keeping a 60 FPS average throughout the entire gaming experience. So at least in this opening level, playing it at the stock 15 watt TDP with these graphics settings is going to give us a more than playable gaming experience, and it at least visually does look noticeably better than the original game, though you would hope so considering how old the original game is. But you will notice that we are getting nowhere near the level of performance that we would have gotten out of the original game on here. The original game, we were pretty much having a high refresh rate gaming experience at the max graphics settings, while here we're pretty much struggling to keep a 60 FPS average without any major dips that actually end up going below that. Now you'll see that the frame times in general are very consistent. The moments where we will fall below 60 are going to be few and far between, but it isn't exactly going to be the greatest experience ever, but it is going to be more than playable for most people. Just one of those things where if you're expecting the level of performance that you would get out of the original game, you will not get that here, but you are getting a far better visual experience. In general though, I think that this game is more than perfectly playable at the stock 15 watt TDP, though there will be certain missions where the FPS will kind of struggle to keep up because of the fact that there will be a lot of things happening at once. There will be more open areas, but in general the game will keep up, and at no point in playing did I ever feel like there was anything too wrong with what was going on. You will just occasionally see a stutter here and there. It'll just be when things are loading in. Outside of that, everything is usually very smooth, very consistent, and more than perfectly playable. Of course, we can try to improve this performance by raising either the TDP or dropping the resolution, and I really don't want to have to drop the resolution if I don't have to, and in this case we really shouldn't have to, considering we're already getting more than passable experience in terms of just playing at the stock TDP. So let's see what 25 watts actually ends up doing for us, and you'll see that what the 25 watts TDP actually ends up doing is in these more open missions where there are a lot more things being rendered on screen, where the FPS is going to struggle to stay above 60, where if you were still at the stock 15 watt TDP, you'd be closer to the 40s a lot of the time. The performance that we're getting here, at least at the stock TDP, would really just be a lot more difficult to really enjoy. It's still doable, though it's going to be just a far worse experience than this. In general though, it is more than playable like this. I had a decent time playing. There will be moments of stutter and things like that, but it's usually just when things are being loaded in, and the 25 watt TDP really helps to level out those 1% lows here. These are really the moments where the 25 watt TDP really comes in handy, because it actually does help to keep those FPS numbers high and our 1% lows at least at a reasonable range. In a Call of Duty game, dropping down to 1% lows of 30 definitely isn't the greatest experience ever, but we are at least keeping a consistent high FPS average, and the game is perfectly playable. It's very enjoyable like this. It is far more doable than if we were just at the stock 15 watt TDP. The game is definitely playable at the stock TDP, but you will be noticing a lot more stutters, a lot more 1% load drops. In general, it does just become a pretty rough experience, considering that we're already at a 1% low of 30 here. Of course, we can try to raise the TDP even more to try to boost the performance and see if that can actually net us a nice gain. But before that, I want to show you what the FPS is like when we're going through interior areas at the 25 watt TDP. Here you can see that going through the end of this mission here, the FPS that we're getting indoors is significantly higher, but there are some pretty severe fluctuations in FPS happening here and there. But in general, inside you are going to have a far better experience, but it's the outdoor areas in this game that really actually start to make the FPS start to fall apart. So in general, this is going to be the best way to play the game. I would recommend just playing it at the 25 watt TDP. If you're going to be playing at stock, consider dropping things down to 900p instead, because you are going to be running into issues in these larger maps. Now the 30 watt TDP actually does see a nice gain in terms of the 1% lows that we're getting, the averages that we're getting, and overall the gaming experience does feel a lot more consistent, a lot smoother. And in general, the areas where we're in indoor areas, it is ultra smooth. When we're going through the streets here, everything is also ultra smooth. The 1% lows are at a range now where everything just feels a lot more consistent. If you can play this game at these settings, I would really recommend you just play the game at the highest TDP possible, because it does smooth out the experience overall. If you don't have the thermal headroom for it, just go for the 25 watt TDP. And if you're at the 15 watt TDP, I would recommend dropping down to 900p to get yourself the best possible experience, because depending on the mission that you're going to be getting at the 15 watt TDP, you are going to run into issues, while at the higher TDP settings, those issues are for the most part resolved. You aren't really going to be having as major issues as if you were just at that stock 15 watt TDP. 15 watts really just seems to be a really rough spot, at least for these Zen 2 based APUs, where the CPU really isn't able to clock as high as it would like, and in a lot of circumstances the GPU itself is also not reaching max clock speeds. I mean, you'll see here that even at the 30 watt TDP, we're not exactly maxing out the clock speed on either the GPU or the CPU in a lot of circumstances. You'll see the GPU will be pegged at its highest speed, but the CPU not so much. Now, it might just not be necessary at those moments, but it is one of those things that even with 30 watts of power being pumped through the system, it isn't keeping a max clock speed on the CPU or anything like that. In general though, the game is still very playable on here. The remaster, visually speaking, is definitely a worthwhile addition. This is one of my favorite games ever. I think I've played the campaign of like Modern Warfare at this point probably more than 20 times. It was one of those things where when I was a kid and I got this, I was playing that and the multiplayer constantly. It was like my first real video game addiction, where it was like as soon as I sat down in front of the computer, I was just there for the next like 4 to 8 hours. Like during the summer break that COD 4 was out, I pretty much spent that entire summer sitting in front of my computer, where I would just be playing Call of Duty 4 from the moment that I would just wake up. I would sit down and I would play the game until it was like sometime like in the morning. I would pretty much just play until the sun came up. I'd go to bed only to wake up and play more Call of Duty 4. It was just a wild time. It was one of the most addicted I have ever been to a video game ever. So being able to actually play a remaster of this is just really, really nostalgic. And honestly, I feel like I'm probably going to keep playing this on my desktop though, just because I want to have, the visuals all maxed out. But I'm really happy to see that it performs this well on this system. I'm very curious how the Modern Warfare 2 remaster is actually going to perform on here. We're going to be taking a look at that one sometime after this one as well. So stay tuned for that. If you found this video interesting and useful, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.